Welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. Today, I am here with former National Security Advisor to the Trump administration, Victoria Coates. Victoria and I are going to talk about a couple of really light subjects like war and the election. So I think this is going to be a good episode. Victoria, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Bryce. Good to be with you.
Yeah, so we got a lot going on. And I'm excited to get your perspective because, we've got less than 30 days now to the election. And I truly believe that we've never had more at stake. And we've never had more things going on kind of simultaneously in the world. So I know your perspective is going to be just incredible for us. So let's talk about what you see, and first give us a quick little kind of bio and background, and how you came to work for the Trump administration.
Well, with me, it always starts with the PhD in Italian Renaissance art history. So that's what I always tell our interns. I do have one, and I tell them they have to start there, and there's no sense even trying without it. But I actually worked for former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld and then Ted Cruz, and then did go into the Trump administration on the National Security Council staff, and then spent a really instructive year at the Department of Energy, the last year of the administration. And now I'm at the Heritage Foundation, carrying on that good work from the private sector.
I love it. So just out of curiosity, what was Rumsfeld like as a boss and to work for?
He was just awesome. Just such an incredible American story on, Congress, the White House, being an ambassador to NATO, being Secretary of Defense twice, White House Chief of Staff, and a huge private sector success. And so he really felt he had lived the American dream, and was, it was really wonderful to work with him on telling that story in his memoir, Known and Unknown, which I strongly recommend to anybody who's interested, in all seriousness, not the art history stuff, but anybody who's interested in national security policy making in the United States government. Known and Unknown is a great book.
Yeah, I've never read it. I'll have to put that on my list. And then Ted Cruz. I've met him several times and really appreciate him, and think that he's one of the best guys in the Senate for grilling our opponents and our deep bureaucracy. So I always appreciate him, and he must have been an interesting guy to work for as well.
Yes, he does. He does enjoy hearings maybe a little bit too much. You can see the lawyer in him come out, and yeah, it is a little appreciated or underappreciated ability to really let these people expose themselves for what they are. I mean, they'll tell you the truth if you ask them the right question, and I think Cruz really has a great ability to do that, and he's also fearless. And, if you come up with a cockamamie scheme, but it has a chance of working and it's going to come out a win for the people of Texas and the American people, he'll do pretty much everything, including filibuster for however many hours that was. Really exciting time to be in his Senate office from the beginning. I was there in January of 2013 until December of 2016. So a lot of the sort of foundation blocks of his policies were set then, and it was an exciting time.
All right, and then from there you moved into the Trump administration. So I would love to just get your thoughts on what that was like.
It wasn't planned. Obviously Senator Cruz and then President-elect Trump had their issues during the 2016 Republican primary, and so it didn't occur to me that I would be going into the administration. But they're both patriots, and after the election, they made up and decided the country was more important than any political squabbling. And I had known General Flynn when he was head of DIA, and he'd come in and brief Senator Cruz and me. And so General Flynn called Senator Cruz and asked if this would be possible. And so I assisted him on the transition. And then he was the first national security advisor. And he put me into actually strategic communications for the White House. And I did that and then got mixed up in Middle East affairs.
All right, excellent. Well, we've got, like I said, less than 30 days. What's your perspective on the election and what's happening right now? And it's a wild time.
Yeah, and I'm from Pennsylvania and spend about half of my time there, so we're right in the crosshairs. And the ads and the visits and all the messaging that's going on is really incredible. And the intensity with which the state is being I'm trying to think of a nice word for it. It feels like we're being grilled, but the power of that state is extraordinary, and I think I from a political standpoint, it looks to me favorable to former President Trump. But what we're really focusing on at Heritage, and I think the job we can do for them, is to point out the policy contrasts. And so for the areas I work on, I mean, the policies, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, Bryce. I mean, literally. And look at where we are in the world, in 2024. And look where we were in 2020, even with the pandemic. And, to have the Secretary of State come out and talk about how their work has improved our strategic position. Name one relationship that is better than it was 4 years ago. Name one signature achievement that has made the world a stronger place, a better place, a more prosperous place for the American people. There's literally nothing. There's chaos. And so I think anything I can do to point that contrast out, if it be talking about the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, the horrific war in Ukraine, and the way they've gone about participating in that, and then of course we just marked the first anniversary of the atrocious Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. Everything, every part of the world is in a less stable, more dangerous place, and I think that's what voters need to get focused on. Hopefully,
Yeah, it feels like we've had global disintegration with this administration and the moves that they've been making. For how much the left has mocked Trump and mocked him, and suggested that world leaders found him distasteful and all that sort of stuff. We had stability, and he did have a no nonsense, don't mess with us kind of an approach that worked. And I believe a lot of that came from his business background and negotiations and all the things that he did and did pretty well. Carried us as a country, into a time where, yeah, we just did have stability, and it's almost like a switch was flipped with this new administration, and the world went to hell.
well, and literally that's what they did. They took all of the policies we had put in place and they turned them 180 degrees on the grounds that if we did it, it must be horrible. And so it's everything from canceling the Keystone pipeline to taking the Houthi off the terrorist lists. I don't think anybody at this point thinks the Houthi are anything but card-carrying members of a designated terrorist organization. They stopped using the terms Abraham Accords because they didn't like them either. I mean, who doesn't like peace? Apparently, this crowd. And they really showed tremendous weakness to Putin. And the left likes to say that, Trump is way too friendly with Putin. He's going to coddle Putin, appease Putin. Like, look, Putin didn't invade Ukraine when Donald Trump was president. It did not happen. He wanted to. He said he wanted to 10 years ago, but he didn't do it because he was scared of Donald Trump. And when he saw Joe Biden essentially lobby the Congress against putting sanctions on his Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Putin's pipeline of natural gas into Europe, when he saw that, he thought, these people, I've got them. They are completely enthralled to me. They are going to be addicted to this gas supply, and they're going to let me do whatever I want. And so, he waited a year to take their measure, and then in he went. And that did not happen under Donald Trump. And I believe the former president when he says that he can get to a deal. I think for the reasons you just put out, he does approach these things like a businessman. He does understand literally the art of the deal. And I think he will work to end this war, which the Biden Harris folk just seem to want to perpetuate.
Yeah, and I think it's sad to hear it coming from you, because it does seem to be the truth that they just decided to flip every position that we had, every policy that we had. It's like, okay, let's flip it on its head because it must be terrible. I mean, there's virtually nothing, it seems like, from all the executive orders that on day one they just like, okay, let's cancel these all. And it did, thrust everything into chaos and open up things for the people who knew that Joe Biden was a feeble old man and not really in charge and not really the even figurehead. I mean, he was so weak. And it appears that in all of what we are getting from Kamala Harris it is the exact same, policies, the exact same positions, everything. She's just the new puppet.
No, for sure. And I mean, I guess one thing that makes her a little bit even more frightening is she is a true believer in this stuff. And whether through infirmity or being of a different generation, it was never, Biden never came across as a man of the hard left, although he certainly, his term as president was the most progressive of any in history. But she is a true believer, and we're happy in Pennsylvania. She says she won't ban fracking, but I don't know how much I trust that, because this has been the most extreme environmental administration in history, and it really has done damage to the American economy and to American energy security. We had the governor of Alaska, Governor Dunleavy, at Heritage 2 weeks ago, and he had a card, and on the card were the 66 actions the various departments and agencies of the U.S. government, punitive actions they've taken against the state of Alaska during these 3.5 years to prevent them from harvesting natural resources like obviously coal, oil and gas, rather, but lumber, minerals, all of this. It's much more than they have done to the Iranians. And, our livelihood here is literally under attack. And so deeply concerning what she might actually do as opposed to say if she gets elected.
Yeah, and the people who are the environmentalists or those folks that are ginning up all of those policies against our energy independence and everything else. I mean, we've seen what they have done in almost every state in the in the union to destroy it. It's almost like they are environmental terrorists. I had a guy on my show here recently because, we have so many fires, here in the Pacific Northwest and all of these regions. And it directly is environmentalist policies that won't allow the things that have been done for hundreds of years, like the logging and the mining and all of the things that clear out the bad parts of these forests and the dead parts of these forests and create industry and everything else, and then, oh, by the way, also manage the forests at the same time. And it seems like they're doing that on every little thing because they have this particular view of the environment. And, most of it, I think, stems from a worldview that we shouldn't be on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
Human beings are a scourge. And it's absolutely destroying things. So yeah, I shudder to think if they win, what is going to happen over the next administration term. I hope everybody steps up and gets out and does what it takes, even if you don't particularly like Trump. We have one chance, I believe, to right this ship, and it is Donald Trump.
Yeah, it to my mind, we've had a number of folks who were, say, never Trumpers, who actually have come out in recent weeks and said, you know what, I'm voting for him. You've had the extreme cases, your Bill Kristols, your Liz Cheneys, but a lot of
Yeah.
folks who were very, very hostile to Trump are like, this isn't a choice. And I can feel about Donald Trump however I want to, but he will fight for this country. And our lives were better when he was in office, and the country was more secure. And so I think that is becoming increasingly clear. And obviously, the vice president had the most extraordinary, rollout love fest in the history of modern politics. That hasn't gotten her over the line, and there's not much more of that they can do. That's kind of hit its limit, and I don't see it really moving the needle with the undecided voters in the swing states. And so So I think just pointing out those policy contrasts and try to take the personalities out of it is a winning formula for the former president.
Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, they've done everything they can to polish her up. And you saw the propaganda machine, I mean, on full force. And they've run out of that. And it seems like they're turning on her in the media a little bit. There's been some recent interviews that have been disastrous for her where they just pressed her slightly on a few
Mm-hmm.
things, which includes, hey, you were in charge. You were part of this administration. You were talking about how in charge you were and how participatory you were in this administration. And, why did you let all this stuff happen that somehow, oh, now you're not going to? I mean, it's amazing to witness. And yeah, I think people are also getting tired of her. And the more she speaks, I think that's better for us because she's terrible at her communication, and becomes more untrustworthy the more she opens up her mouth. So that's what I'm praying for. Well, let's shift gears here and talk about Israel. And I'm very curious about your perspective about that war and all of the stuff that's happening over there in the Middle East. I think it's again just more chaos and more craziness that's going to affect us for years to come.
Well, and it's been a fascinating year since the October 7th attacks, and a very tough year, a very somber year for the region. And I was up at the Israeli embassy on Monday for the commemoration event, and it's hard. It's hard to look back and see what happened on that terrible day and the human toll that's gone on since then. It is a very clarifying, I think, event for taking a fresh look at the Middle East. And that's why I've just actually written a book called The Battle for the Jewish State, which is precisely about this. It's about what happened and how did we get from October 7th and those horrible terrorist attacks to Monday, when we didn't have people in the streets marching for Israel. We had people in the streets marching for Hamas. And I think a lot of Americans are like, what the heck is going on here? How is this happening on our streets? This isn't some abstract foreign problem. This is happening right here. And so, I think realizing the degree of the rot of anti Semitism that has crept into our culture, most prominently on our academic campuses, but it's other places, but that's where it's the worst. And, that has come here. And we are not over it after World War II. It is still happening, and in a way, it's an opportunity for us to admit that we have this problem and then start to take steps to dry up its funding and its reach. And so I think that's one critical thing we as a country have to come to terms with. And I think for the Israelis, what happened on October 7th was so horrific and so damaging that they've realized they can't go back into the rinse repeat cycle of previous Gaza conflicts where you get as far as you can, you mow the grass, and then everybody hollers for a ceasefire and they back down. They haven't done that this time, and on everything from the incursion of Rafah to the more recent actions in Lebanon against Hezbollah, Israel's in it to win it, not to manage it, not to accommodate the Palestinians or Hezbollah, but to win a war. And I think that's very much their message to the people of Gaza, which is surrender, give back the hostages, surrender. Hamas has to lay down their arms, and then we will talk about terms. But until you get to that point, we've been doing this for 50 years now. And Israel won, and they won in 1973. They've won every military conflict, but no one's told the Palestinians until this year. So, I am, as I said, very hard year to go through. Very hard to watch what's happened to the relationship, given how warm it was under President Trump, how strained it is under the Biden-Harris administration. But I think if they are permitted to carry this through and get to victory. However, ironically, this is actually the best thing for the Palestinian people to finally get past this grievance that they have and maybe negotiate something for themselves. But until we get to that point, it's hard to see.
Yeah, you know what has disturbed me. By the way, you are completely right. The university campuses have been diseased for a long time. So for all that to bubble up out of those here in the states, it's been really not surprising to watch. I am so concerned though about the rise of anti-Semitism just in general, and I do believe, by the way, and I believe we should always be on record with this, that it is okay to criticize the state of Israel. It is okay to hold them accountable for how they wage war and all of those sort of things, and shine a spotlight on those things, and make sure that they're doing whatever they can to protect innocent life. And I believe that that's okay for us to all call that out. But how did it go from, hey, we just want to save the babies in Palestine, to dancing in the streets pro Hamas level? I mean, I'm blown away, and I called that out early on. I said they are not supporting Palestine; they're supporting Hamas. You watch their language change, and it did. I mean, very quickly, to where they're dancing around in Hamas garb, and carrying Hamas flags, and it and that evolution went very quickly, and it's disturbing to watch some of, even people that I'm very friendly with, and appreciate and admire,
Mhm.
who share our values on a bunch of things, saying some of the most wicked things about Israel, and really largely the Jews. Because again, Israel is a secular state. It makes a lot of mistakes. It's not perfect. Neither are we. Let's call those things out. But what's happening now is egregious.
Well, and I'm a Christian. I have my reasons for being interested in and
Same.
sympathetic to the Holy Land, but that's not really the question here. The question is what's in the interests of the United States, and
Mhm.
it's one of the things I wanted to do in this book is lay out the history of the relationship. And where did it start 76 years ago, and how did the modern state of Israel come into being? And one interesting thing for the academic culture question is when Albert Einstein fled the Nazis in the 30s and came to the United States and Princeton, he wrote a letter then saying there is a bad anti-Semitism problem on American campuses. And American Jews don't understand it, and they're not doing anything about it, and it's going to get worse. And he was correct that
Wow.
that was the case, and that's what we're needing to get after now. But as a national security policymaker, for me, I look at Israel and I look at the Palestinians, and there's simply no comparison. And it's not fair to try to make them
Agreed.
into apples because they're apples and oranges. And you have a nation state very successful despite all of its challenges, which is, I think, now the 18th most powerful country in the US News and World Report ranking of influential countries. I mean, that's extraordinary for Israel, a country of 9 million people in a real tough neighborhood, to have achieved that kind of success. And the Palestinians are a cause. And the cause is the eradication of a successful state that's an ally of the United States.
Yeah.
So it's not possible to make them into equals. And it's why I think, Israel does need to win this war. And I agree, I am sympathetic to the Palestinian people. I have tried mightily to help them and to try to get them into a more positive posture where they can take advantage of the international generosity that wants to rain down on them. I mean, there's so many donor nations that want to do something, but it's hard if you're a donor nation and you come in and you build something or you invest in something and they blow it up, which is what's happened
Yeah.
uh, to date. So I think, just from a practical standpoint, the particularly Hamas supporters, and we're starting to see Hezbollah flags in those protests too,
Yep.
which is deeply alarming. They have to answer the question, what is in the best interests of America? And if you say partnering with terrorist groups, I've got to question your logic there.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. What do you say to the critics? Because there are some honest critics, and I think their perspective is valuable to what do you say to their concern about the tremendous influence that Israel has over our policy or our politicians, or I mean, because I think that's right for us to be concerned. There are some that put Israel's interest over our own sometimes. What do you say to that?
I actually think there's less of the putting Israel's interests over our own than it is more seeing Israel as a tremendous asset, something that, quite frankly, the American taxpayer has made a massive investment in over these last, particularly 50 years. And the thing about the Congress, which is where you might expect to see that influence most, is while certainly politicians do listen to money, they will rarely in bulk support a policy that is not popular with their constituents.
Hmm.
And so the strong bipartisan support for Israel, which goes back to 1948, I mean, that was where Truman, when he recognized Israel right after the founding, I mean, that's where he got his support. The State Department, not surprisingly, was extremely pro-Arab and against the decision, but the Congress was right there because that's what they're hearing from the American people. So if this were somehow, foreign or not attractive to them, money alone is not going to move a politician, unless they think there's some political gain to be had. So I think it does reflect, the strong majority of the American people. But I have no problem, talking about it. I think, the groups that further this influence, APAC, for example,
Sure.
should be as transparent as possible. And if they want to move United States policy, I mean, make that case to the American people. So I think there is a kind of a temptation to kind of mask what can be a form of anti-Semitism in this kind of, well, I'm going to be politically critical of Israel. Agreed, you can be. I mean, their politics is a shambles half the time.
Right. Yep.
So yes, I've criticized it to their faces, and they agree. Then again, we also can be a shambles as well. So I think making sure that it is purely in policy and and political realm, and keep it out of the sort of demonization of Jews more broadly.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I'm also Christian boy and preacher's kid, and do believe that we've got a responsibility, when it comes to the Jewish people, and God will bless us in our efforts, and I do believe that there's evangelistic opportunity for us there as well.
Mhm.
But there are again, very many things that them as a secular nation, I do not support and do not agree on, and certainly there are secular Jews that have done things within our industry here that is egregious. But that's very different, giving honest criticism for those things and what individual actions are and all that. That's very different than the tenor of what I'm seeing out there in this growing, just oh, it's the Jews, kind of stuff that all of a sudden bubbled way up, and I think at that heart there's tremendous evil that leads towards very, very dark situations that have happened again and again throughout history, and I think we need to be very, very careful of that, and thread those needles appropriately, because no one should be exempt from criticism, but boy, what's happening today is wild to witness. Like, how did we,
Mhm.
especially on these college campuses, go to I mean, be Jew hatred overnight? I mean, it's a wild thing to witness, and I've had my friend Rabbi Barkley on a few times, talking over some of these things and trying to understand that spirit, and I can only say it's an evil spirit that infects people.
It does, and it is startling, and it should be startling and shocking to Americans how quickly and virulently it burbled up. And it the Nazis tried to hide their atrocities. They tried to go to wooded, secluded areas to establish their death camp. The Hamas people didn't try to hide it. They had GoPro cameras on them. I've seen that footage. It's
Oh, yeah.
appalling, and the stuff they've released isn't the worst of it.
No, it's true.
You, it's inhuman and so evil, and to have that celebrated on the streets of the United States of America, as I said, should be shocking to everyone, and without stifling free speech, of course, but